dum da 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 dum da dum dum dum. Okay. I guess we're live, but there's a whole bunch of stuff flashing up here. I don't care about that, so we're done. I don't care about that, so stop telling me. I don't care about this, so stop popping stuff up. There we are. Now that we've cleared all of Twitch's pointless notifications, we're back. It's been a couple of weeks. If you're not watching this live, or if you're watching this from some other country, it has been a hectic couple of weeks. I took a week off because we were busily trying to elect a wet noodle instead of a total waste, total trash fire. And we succeeded, so now we've got a wet noodle in office, or we will soon. And it was extremely stressful. And then all the plumbing in my house broke, and that turned out to be fairly stressful too. So we are currently back, but we're kind of just fooling around. Streaming some random game dev, learning crap, trying out Godot. So we were working on an Unreal project, but that project was specifically just to try and learn Unreal. And while I can't say that I've learned Unreal exactly, I can say that I know enough about it that I think it might be too heavy for most of my needs. It would take me several years to become as good at Unreal as I would need to be to prototype things as quickly as I want to. And I might have to do that. But let's try some alternatives. This is Godot. Godot is a completely open source independent game engine. It's free. And I'm hoping that it works. I'm hoping that it's good because I absolutely despise Epic. They are a trash company, and I hope they go out of business. And Unity is not that much better. So, an open source game engine would be ideal. But last time I looked into Godot, it was very early. It was a couple of years ago, and they barely. You might be able to make games in it, but they weren't out really suitable yet. And it's been a couple of years since then, and I've seen some people put some stuff out in Godot, and it seems like it might be stable, so let's give it a shot. I figured what we'd do today is just kind of futz around learning some 2D stuff here in Godot, because I think it would be fun to figure out how to do some 2D stuff. There's not really any other good 2D engines here. If we wanted to, we could create a scene that's in this Node 2D setup and try and import ourselves some sprites. But we don't have any sprites. So good news, I have this drawing program right here, and I can doodle us up some sprites. So I figured what we might try and do today, just try and create ourselves some nice little faces. Mifaz says that he knew I would try Godot someday. Yep, that day is today. I wasn't a complete newcomer to either Godot or Unreal. I'm also not a complete newcomer to basically everything. I give everything a taste test. But the basic issue I've got is that in order to actually know how good something is, you have to spend a lot of time on it. And previously, I was not so sure about Godot because I tried it before and it was in such an early state. And now that that's not the case anymore, I figure, let's try it. Let's try some Godot. So we're just going to create a very, very basic avatar system just to see how the 2D stuff holds up over time. So we're just going to doodle in some faces and see how that works when we combine it up in Godot. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to draw an outline. This is not going to be the final outline we're going to use. There's something strange that we're going to do, and I'm not sure whether or not you've ever seen this before. We are going to be doing double layer elements. Basically, if you've ever done this before yourself, you may have thought that this would be like the base face sprite. That's a really awful color, but you get the idea, right? So this whole thing would be the face sprite, and you'd have like some shading or something. But in reality, this is not the way you want to do it. What you want to do is you want to have a color layer, and you want to have a separate surface layer. And the reason for that is because you're going to be adding your shadow and your highlights to the surface layer. Now, the reason that's important is because if your skin gets very dark, the black lines are not going to do it any favors. You're going to end up with a very muddy visuals if you just try and like darken the skin tone down and you still have black lines. And that's why it's important that you bake the highlights into the ink layer, this layer. And we'll do that. But first we're going to just do some exporting on some very, very basic stuff. You know, I'm not actually sure where it's exporting to, so just let me set this up briefly. Oh, what do you know? It's in the right spot. Never thought that would happen. But I'll just... not sure exactly how to do this. Surface, face, ink, dot punge. Don't think we need to scale it. I think it's fine the size it is. And then we'll... that's the game. There we are. And then we'll come on back to just the pink layer here and export that too. And we'll call that face color. Something like that. And I don't know how to get Godot to import it. Oh, look at that. It just worked. So Godot didn't even try to import the file that it didn't understand. I actually have another file in this exact same directory, but it's a .clip and obviously, or .csp or whatever it is. And obviously Godot doesn't understand what that is. So it automatically imports things it does understand though. So now we've got some faces. And look, we can just drag them straight in. Exciting stuff, right? Now, if we were to take these two elements, what we would ideally want to do is put them in the same place. So, offset must be offset within the sprite object. I want to have the offset within the... I want to change the position. Transform. There it is. There we are. So now it's at 0, 0. Obviously, 0, 0 is not a great place for these things. It's 0, 0 in pixel terms, meaning that it's in the upper left-hand corner. We'd actually want them to be somewhere down here. And as long as they're in the same spot, it doesn't really matter to me where they are. But for some reason, the transform isn't changing. I may have misunderstood something. Oh, there it is. So when you're updating multiple materials, it looks like it errors out and glitches a little bit. No big deal. So just to sort of get the basic idea going, what we're exploring is how sprites work, and specifically how easy it is to recolor them and stack them in various ways. This clearly is not an overlay. It says modulate the color applied to textures on this canvas item. Well, the face ink is... I can't tell if this is... play. Oh, apparently I haven't saved it yet, so... okay, we'll call it test skin. There we go. Okay, so that didn't change the color of anything. I thought I knew I thought that was how to do it, but apparently not. I could change the material nodes, which would definitely work, and I'm going to have to do it someday. I might as well do it now, right? But for some reason, it's not... maybe I have to create it separately, link it up. This is what you see. This is what you get when you kind of just blunder into someplace. I played around a little bit with Godot in 3D. This is the first time I'm fussing with it in 2D. But I've seen people create some pretty impressive 2D stuff, so I'm sure we can do it. And hopefully it won't be too terribly challenging. The only problem I've got is... getting it to recolor nice and easy and cheap. So if we were to change this, so I'm on the face, oh, I was modifying the face ink. I'm just an idiot. That's the problem. All right, so the problem here is that I had this upside down in my head. Let's try that again. This time with the correct thing associated. Aha, see, there. Look at that. Nice, right? Not sure why it has decided that it needs to set an output for every frame where I drag this pixel, but whatever. And using this is a really simple and cheap way to change the skin color of your characters, right? The problem with it is that when you find a skin color like this, it becomes very hard to read the face just because it's black and dark brown, and that's all you can see. When it's bright like this, well, I mean, it's simplified, but because of the way that the lines delineate the surface of the head, you get a good read on it. When you're like this, you don't really, but there is a way around that, and that is to alter the ink layer, the front layer, to include some highlights. And you want some shadows for this, so it reads better here. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to pull the focus off of the lines. The lines are not going to be the important part of this visual. To the extent where we could probably make this without any lines. We could probably do it just with flat paint. But we're going to try it with lines first. So what we're going to do is we are going to create another layer here. And we're going to just stick this into its own folder since it's going to be its set of things here. And we're going to want to just set this to be a darker tone so we can see it a little better. And then we're going to go ahead and just brush in some bright elements here. Ooh, that brush is a little bit too rough. Now, some of these elements are going to be in the individual features rather than in the face, but we can just put a couple of them in to get a kind of idea that this is where we're going, right? And then similarly, we can put in some shadows, like so. Where is our... I'll just do it on this layer, it's fine. So if we do something like this, then we can even come in with a little bit of a brush here. And this is a very, very soft shaded approach, and that's not what I would normally do, but we're just prototyping it out, so I'm not too concerned. We're going to have to go back and repaint all this anyway, so we might as well just kind of quickly rough it up. And we'll go ahead and save over that face ink again. And now the key here is that the face ink layer is not being recolored. So when we come back over here, you can see now that we've got that. It's not layering very well, is it? Look at that. So there is apparently a problem with Godot where it is not respecting the alpha edges. Why you being like that, Godot? That's interesting. I mean, that's clearly not the problem in here. Why is it a problem when I export it? Do I need to change the export settings? No, I don't. This is clearly correct. I bet I need to change the import settings in Godot. I bet it is compressing it or simplifying it. So let's get rid of that. Click on this. How do I get to the import values here? Surely it has... What's going on? Are these not... So the problem is that this facing layer, can you see that really crisp line between the darker area and the brighter area? That line doesn't exist. That's being faked. It's being invalid paint jobs. So that's obviously not what we want. Similarly, we've got some glitter up here around this edge. This is a sign of an alpha blend system that isn't working right. Usually that's because someone is compressing the file. But the scale is set to 1. And it doesn't seem to change even if I rotate it. In Unity, you can change how these things get imported, but I have a sneaking suspicion that they're not getting imported with any sort of filter. I have a sneaking suspicion that they're just being flat imported because they're a PNG and that's what you get. But I'm not sure why they would be drawing so badly. This is interesting. I mean, if we can't get this to draw right, then there's no point. So let's take a quick look on Google. Oh, not in that browser. That browser is full of ads. That's that is my work browser that I use to make sure that my work is compatible with everything. I certainly am not working at the moment. So come over here and do a search for Godot, PND, transparent, help with transparency. It doesn't seem to be... People are asking things like, how do I even make it transparent in the first place, which is not what I want. Manually import the file in the editor. My upstairs neighbor has begun their clog dance. I don't believe that this is the same problem we're having. Well, it's from 2015. That would be why. Let's add in crappy. I have a problem with white strokes around my assets. Let's see whether or not that is the same problem I'm having. It certainly is. The problem you are describing is described as blending artifacts. This page does not exist. Well, thanks for the link. I'm sure that was very helpful several years ago. Simply importing the image to the import menu. But I don't see an import menu. Is this the import menu? No. Let's add a new folder. We'll call this Sprites. And then here in Sprites, we're going to try and import a new resource. Give me a second here. Just going to try a couple of things that might cause the computer to do weird shit. So, resource. This is not what I want. Oh, import. There it is. How do I tell it to import something? See, it's import, but it just doesn't... Do I have to drag it in? Is that what it is? Let's find out. I'll just go into C. Why does it keep reopening the D drive and displaying all of the... you know that sidebar that Windows introduced a couple of versions ago, like Windows 7 or so? There's a sidebar in the Explorer and it gets cluttered up with, hey, I think that you want to see all this shit. And for some reason, it keeps opening up all of my work files and displaying them in the sidebar. And it's like, that's why I can't have nice things. And I've got to keep cutting to wait and see your files because I am obligated not to just spam those out into the world. I'm just not supposed to. All right, so if I go over into this and I grab the face ink and drop it in. Okay. Wait, so it's just right here. Okay, so I don't need to do this. I can just do it myself. Let's go ahead and delete this one. All I needed to know is where this import was. I expected it to show up over here or something, and it's not. It's over here. It's fine. It's fine. So, if we take a look, we've got the lossless compression, got filtering turned on. I'm not sure what that does. Fix alpha borders. Is that the problem that we're seeing? Let's turn it off and re-import. That's space color, darn it. This is the one we need. Re-import. Yep, that fixed it. So basically they used to... Oh, look at that. There's the alpha borders again. Alright, so basically they've got a system in place which attempts to fix one of their problems, which is this guy, and in the process introduces a new problem, which is this guy. Alright, so if I pre-multiply the alpha, it seems to work okay. What happens if I turn off fixed borders? Nothing. Okay. Well, let's see if I can get away with pre-multiplying the alpha, because that might be fine. But I seem to think that there are some dark patches here. It looks like there's some dark patches. Let's bring that face color back and see whether or not those... Yeah, look at that. That's obviously dumb and stupid. Why are you so mean to me? Okay. Oh, you know what? I bet that'll fix it. Yeah. So the issue here is that they had filtering turned on. I'm not sure why you'd want filtering turned on, and I'm not sure what filtering actually is, but it appears to basically smooth it out. So basically, if you turn this on, what it does is it pretends it's a very high quality, 1,000 pixel image. And that's why it introduces all of those alpha glitches. But if I turn that off, the alpha glitches go away and we have this result. It's much easier to use. It's fairly straightforward. All right, so now that we've turned off all of its processing, we get what we were expecting to get. And you can see that if we, oh, that's the face ink. We want to do it with the face color. You can see that if we now bring this color down to some other skin tone, like say this one, you can still read the idea that it has a face shape, because there are bright spots being displayed on top of the dark spots. And even when you have the full pale skin elements, you have the dark spots on top of the bright spots. But this has to be its own layer. The face ink layer has to be separate from the skin layer, because when you change the skin layer to be darker, well, obviously if that was the part that had the white patches, the highlights on it, the white patches would become darker. And then that would be the opposite of what we want. So by having this simply be a two-layer setup, you can get away with having one of the layers get recolored and the other layer have it pop. It's not ideal from the perspective of making it easy to make assets, but it is ideal from the perspective of being able to recolor the assets. And I'm just now playing around with what the various arrangements do here. And this is kind of fun. So if I put the face ink underneath the face color, you can see that it only darkens. It doesn't brighten. There's something about this where it is not... Even though the face ink is on top, it's a multiply. It's not a strict overlay, an alpha overlay. And I think the reason for that is because they want to make it easy for you to be able to multiply without having to specify like a multiply shader or something. So what that means is that if we were to take this down to some relatively light tone like this and then cut and paste it, can we duplicate? Duplicate. There we are. If we add this in, I bet it'll be darker. Yeah, look at that. And then if we duplicate this and put it in, it'll be darker. Yeah. So basically, if the sprites are layered inside of each other, inside of the scene view, they multiply. I wonder whether that's something that can be set. Because for reasons that are fairly obvious, it would be handy to have some of these nested within each other. And I can understand why they would do this. It's just a matter of... this isn't technically a multiply. It's a screen. Anyway, the overlay, I can see why they do it, because they feel like it's intuitive and it's a way for you to figure out what you want. But the problem here is it's not what I want. That's for in-scene lights. That's not it at all. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see any easy to detect way to change how that works. It might be in the settings somewhere. Let's just take a quick little look. Project settings. No, I don't see anything obvious here. That's fine. It's not that big a deal at the moment. We'll just live with it for now. We'll put them inside of some overall node here. Can we just create a generic node? Yeah. So if we put both of these inside of the head node, yeah, good. So they do work fine if they're next to each other. And that means that we should be able to move this node around, although I don't see it. Is it just this thing up here? Here it is. That's interesting. That's the node 2D. That's not what I want to move around. I want to move this node around. But it doesn't appear to have a physical presence, does it? Maybe node was the wrong thing to use. Let's try again here. Spatial node. That's a 3D object. Node 2D. That's a 2D object. There we are. This is what we want. Node 2D. And delete this node because it doesn't have any physical presence. Here we are. This is the node we want. And so now you can see that we can move that around individually. It's got the same class as the base node. So the base node is not a, the base node is not a scene specific node. This isn't one of those games where there's a scene node. And that means that we should be able to play pretty fast and loose with things. Great. Now let's go ahead and add in some features just so that we've got some more variation here. And to do that, we're obviously going to add in some more things up here. And we'll be using, sometimes we'll be using the 2-layer approach if it has a structural piece to it, and sometimes we'll be using a 1-layer approach if the structure is less important. Let's go ahead and just create some dot eyes for now. Can I duplicate this? Here we are. That way I get the mirroring. So if we were to create some eyes, we're going to create some very generic eyes. And what we're going to want to do is add in some highlights to these eyes so that they feel like they exist outside of what the eye looks like. So basically we're adding in some eye light shine up here just so that we get a nice visual when the skin is dark. I don't want to overdo it though. So we'll just softly, there we go. And that ought to just make it pop a tiny, tiny bit. And that should be okay for now. We'll figure out exactly what we want to do later. There we go. And then for this, we're going to want to have the eyes use a... why is this not working? Oh, it's in the wrong layer. So basically we want to have some whites here. And now the key here is that those whites are not going to be white. We're going to recolor them to be whatever color we want the eyes to be. Very basic, right? So let's put this in here, rename this to head, and make it vanish. And then we will hide this guy and export this guy. And we will call these, in sprites, we'll call these eyes a line. There we go. We might have to tell all of these sprites to change how they're being imported, but that's fine. And then this one will be IA color. There we go. And we'll just keep doing that for a little while. And we'll just duplicate this and then delete that. Put these inside this folder. And let's go ahead and create some more facial stuff, shall we? Might as well just keep duplicating this because it's the layer we're going to need a lot of. I think there might be a way to make this just work, but I don't happen to remember it, so we're going to keep duplicating it. And basically, we're going to need some eyebrows. And for eyebrows, we're not going to need too many layers, but there's a question of whether or not we want the shadow of the eye socket and the shine of the forehead to be part of the eyebrows or not. If we do, we're going to need 2 layers. Otherwise, we're only going to need 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to just flatten this and then use a soft shadow brush to add in some variation here, there, something like that. And obviously the idea is that this will be just directly overridden. Oh, brilliant. I forgot to delete the pieces. That's fine. And the idea is that this will be directly overridden with the hair color, so we won't have to worry about that. We'll just export that. There we are. And bring these back. Let's add in some more stuff. Just duplicate this entire set, and then we will just keep going up and up and up and up. So for the nose, we are going to want to only have an overlay layer. There's not going to be a recolor layer. But we could... No. So the thing here is, for our nose, do we want the nose layer to include things like having a red nose or something? We'll have to figure that out later. It's not something that matters right now. We're just playing around for kicks. So for now, we're just going to create like a button nose, something like this. And then we can just add in some really, really basic... No, I accidentally did that backwards. So we're just going to add in some really, really basic brightening so that people know that this nose is something that exists. That's probably plenty. There we are. And we'll hide the rest here. Doop, 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 and then export that as the nose. If you can't tell, I'm using lines as the file names when they are not intended to be recolored, and I'm using color for the file names when they are intended to be recolored. I know it's a very complicated concept. Anyway, for the mouth, we're not going to need this mirroring. We're going to go ahead and freehand it with the mouth, otherwise it'll appear really, really stiff. So I'm just going to go with a kind of default smile for kicks here. And we're going to want to add in a little bit of brightness and shadow so that it pops just a touch. So to do that, we are going to... That's not the right place, is it? There we are. Going to highlight the lower lip with white, and then above the upper lip. And then we're going to bring that way, way down, because that's obviously far too bright. We just want to make it a little bit, you know? And then we're going to just add in a tiny bit of shadow underneath. And it doesn't really matter for this mouth, but it will matter for most of the other mouths. So, you know, I'll just bring that way down too. Basic stuff. Hide, hide, hide. Hide, and there's our mouth. Now, mouth is a little bit complicated because it might have lipstick on it or something. We might have a lot of different things going on. I'll think about that later. For now, I'll put the art stuff away, and we'll go ahead and assemble this in Godot and see what sort of behavior it has once we start to make things squashy, just for kicks, right? First thing we're going to need to do is re-import all of these things with the correct settings. And that means no filter. Boom. No. What? Did that turn it on or off? Okay, I'm not sure what that was. We don't... it's just nose A now? Well, whatever. It seems to have worked. It's fine. It's all good. There is one more, however. Face color here. Yeah. Okay, so that check mark must have been just to note that it had changed, not that it was on. That's fine. We're going to drop these up into sprites. And then we're just going to drop the rest of these into the scene. No? You're not going to let me? Okay, we'll do it this way then. We should be able to just select the offsets here. Can I copy it? We're going to set all of the offsets to 0 for now. We'll deal with it later. To be honest, it should be at 0 because the node should be what we're moving around, not the faces, not the individual sprites. So this is more or less right. There are a couple of things that are not in the right order, but that's not a big deal. So we'll move them around until they are. Pop. That's more or less it. We can take the browse A color and we can change the visibility to be some kind of hair color sort of thing. And we can change that eyes A color to be some kind of eye color sort of thing. And there we've got our primitive little customizable figure. Kind of looks like a cocky asshole, but hey. Sorry, I'm rearranging my mic. Hope that didn't make too much noise. And there's no hair or anything here because I want to do a little bit of testing to see whether or not these things can be stretched without too much difficulty, whether they can be, tilted and skewed. Let's try spinning this guy. Let's see here. Here's our spin. Okay, so that seems to work fine. Now, the reason this works fine is, of course, because the pixels we're using are much, much larger than the actual pixels of the screen. And because of that, they can draw half pixels and dither. As you can see here, there's some chop, depending on the quality of the streaming today. And that's simply because they're drawing what is technically a half pixels. And it looks like their algorithm for doing that isn't too crap, so we'll live with it. Now the question becomes what happens when we decide we're going to stretch some stuff. So, come on. You won't let me stretch two things at once? What kind of jerks are you? Fine, we'll do it manually. There. So when we stretch it, you can see that what we're getting is a lot of distortion in terms of a lot of extra black on these lines. That's something we can probably change later, deal with as we'd like. I could draw different faces for different kinds of people here. But what I really want to do is just explore a little bit about whether or not these can be moved without too much damage if we want to. Now the issue is that we've baked some of the primitive pieces. We've baked some of the shadows and stuff into the core face structure. So that means that our core face structure determines a lot of what where our features should show up. And I'm just going to drop the nose down there. If we were to take these face colors back to 1, 1. Yeah, so you can see that it's pretty flexible. It's not too bad in terms of being allowed to manipulate these however we feel. I think this will work fine. If I wanted to create a fun little character builder, it's very clear that this would work just great. I don't see any problems with it in the slightest. Now the questions are whether or not there are problems later on with things like, well, first off, I think the face ink does need to be below the rest after all. I was thinking it'd be better above. It's clearly better below. Yeah, there we are. So, yeah. So the question is whether I can get away with things like animating these characters easily enough. How difficult that is. It's something I haven't played around with much. And you can see that as we darken the character's face a little bit, we don't completely lose track of the features. If we were to move this node down so that you can see it without the lines on it, you can see that even when we have a fairly dark skin tone, we have these bright patches. But because the bright patches are tied to the overall head shape, we lose any sort of detail that we get from eyebrows and stuff. You can see the eyebrow is currently raised into the middle of this head bright spot, and that's really not how it should be. If I move the eyebrow, we need to move the shadows. Let's go ahead and set that up. And just to reiterate, I'm just kind of goofing around here. I'm de-stressing after a very, very stressful couple of weeks. So down here we've got our head, and this is the part of our head that has the brightness and darkness. But I think that it might actually have... yeah, so the darkness is on this layer, which is fine. We'll just get rid of it. I don't want to use a hard brush, I think. There we are. Phew. There we are. And then here we can just ditch this. Oh, that part we keep. Yeah, just ditch this. That's the only part we need. Later on we might have like different ears or something. It's not a big deal. Let's go ahead and hide all this stuff. Oh. There we go. Now we've just took out the visuals for the forehead and the eye sockets, and you can see how much of a difference that makes. That's kind of the point. So we're going to want to put those back in. Up here in the eyebrow, we've got an eyebrow recolor. I guess we need to turn the skin back on so we can tell. That's fine. Oh, I didn't mean to delete it. There we are. Where is the eyebrow? There it is. So we've got the eyebrow color here, and we're going to need to add in an eyebrow overlay layer, which is just going to be that shininess above the eyebrow that says that there's a forehead up here, you know? Like that. And we're going to want to add in some shading. Now, because we know this is going to go below the eyebrow layer, above the eyebrow layer, we're going to need to make sure that it doesn't actually run over the eyebrows. Otherwise, it's going to end up making him look a little strange, right? There we are. So that layer is going to be our eyebrow line layer. What the fuck are you doing? I don't know what you just tried to do there. I don't want you to do any of that. It's trying to be helpful. There, so that's some lines there. We're going to want to do the same thing for our eyes. So our eyes are here. And we're going to want to add into our eye, that's the eye color layer. We're going to want to add into our eye lines layer some eyeshadow so that we get a feel for the socket existing. Don't need much, just a touch. Now we've already got the white part, which is just a little bit of, the eye reflecting incoming light off of the eyelids. And we could add a nice dark layer underneath, but we don't want this character to look like a villain, or this eye set to look like a villain, so we won't. We need to disable that, and then export this as our eye line. Boom. All right, back into Godot, and can you re-import all that shit? We're missing the eyebrow line. That's because it's a new file that didn't exist until just now. Brow lines. Drop that in, and then we're going to want to move it so it's in sync with the eyes. That's interesting. Oh, we moved the brows without moving. That's right. So these need to be in the same spot. It's not a big deal. I just need to make sure they're not moved separately from each other. And here you can see that as we move these, the shine goes with them. Now, obviously, that shine might not work because it's able to go off the top of the head. So let's go ahead and reduce that shine a little bit. Most of our characters are going to have hair. Even if they weren't going to have hair, it would be something where we would put the high shine the high forehead shine. We would put that off onto a forehead portion rather than making it part of the eyebrow. So for the eyebrow, we can just do this, a nice short little one. That'll do. Brow lines. Yeah, that's right. There we are. And you can see that even when the brow is way, way up there, we don't have any problems with that. Oh, well. Put that away. We don't have any problems with that anymore. It's no longer flying off the top until the brows are so high that they're cartoonish anyway, right? So we have no problem stretching these brows around a little bit and making them work for their... Why didn't that work? I have got to figure out why Godot sometimes doesn't let me multi-edit, because that's quite annoying. And then we can still do the same things with all these others, you know. And we can also scale them. There's no reason not to, aside from the lack of multi-editing. So we could say like 0.8, 0.8. And now we've got this really closely set tiny eyes. Now the problem with this approach is that the eyes can't be scaled separately from their position, so we can't have a left eye that's small but on the outside and a right eye that's small but on the outside. If we scale the eyes, we scale them outwards from each other or inwards towards each other. That is a problem, and we could resolve that by having a different left eye and right eye mesh or sprite if we wanted to. Don't really feel like it. For now, I'm pretty happy with how this looks just on its own. What do you folks think? I think that this was pretty good for less than an hour of work. Obviously, the basics are very, very basic at this point. But even with the skin going, to almost completely black, it's still a pretty legible character. It might be a little bit exaggerated here and there, though. There's some stuff we'll have to think about later if we want to do that. But them's the basics. So if we bring this back up to some kind of ghostly pale, you can see how the shadows really help to make this character feel like they have, a structure to their face. They exist in some ways, and that's an important part. If we bring this up to 1.1 and 1.1, we get the nice big wide set eyes like this. And then we might be bringing the nose down and the mouth down. And the thing about these sorts of characters is a lot of people focus on the shape of the face, which I think, that's something that's important to do. But the most important things for how we recognize a face are the face, not the shape of the head around the face. And the shape of the face is going to depend on what kind of visuals you can pull, but in essence, it's going to be things like how far is this distance? How far is this distance? How high up or low down are the eyes? That sort of detail work is a lot more important to me than changing the overall shape of the face. That said, you want to have a couple of different facial shapes, obviously. Otherwise, everybody's always going to look like they have a baby face. But the proximity of the layers to the other layers, moving things up and down, is easy to do, and it matters a lot. The only problem with it is, of course, it's hard to make it randomizable because the random numbers might not end up giving you the right, what do you want to call it? They might end up like bringing something off the edge or screwing up something so it doesn't actually line up anymore. There we are. So, for example, if we were to customize the brows down here, that's obviously going to be stupid and strange. And if a player wants to do that, fine. That's the player's choice. But to do it randomly is a bad thing. So you need to figure out what the limits are on how far things can go randomly. And the way you do that is actually by nesting this shit. So let's go ahead and create a couple more nests. So we'll add a new node 2D child node here. What's a control node? Oh, user interface. Well, you will keep it with these for now. Hiccup. And what you would do is you would drop related elements into this node. make sure that this is at 0, 0. Yeah. So what you would do then is, because all of these elements have a relationship to each other, you can move these elements individually a small amount, and then you can move the cluster of elements a small amount. And because of that, you can end up with quite a lot of movement, but it doesn't end up causing any overlaps. Very basic technique. And you do the same thing with the nose and the mouth, and that sort of stuff, because all of those things need to be able to move within the face and relative to each other at the same time. And it sounds very complicated to do, but it's not. You just have to nest them properly. And that's the story. And my voice is going because I recorded 4 hours of blanking on the name. Paradise Killer. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and stop now. Get back into the streaming thing very slowly. Thanks for hanging out with me. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next time. Feel free to leave comments if you care. And if you don't care, show up for whatever I'm doing, I guess. Have a good one, everybody.